Hello, everybody. Welcome to my new series, The Storytellers. We're going to be talking about visual storytelling mediums, comics, movies, TV shows, comic strips, maybe even throw some cartoons in there. I'm sorry about the late start. I had I had brought Chuck into the room here. We were chatting away, and then I realized I hadn't clicked the go live button. So I'm a few minutes behind. But believe me, Chuck and I had a great conversation, which we will redo for you right here and now. What I wanted to tell you is that in this series, I'm going to have guests like Chuck on today, and sometimes I'll just take specific artists or cartoonists or writers and their work and deconstruct it and tell you what makes them so great. Show you what they did and why they did it and the decisions they made, which might give you a better appreciation for their work. So that's basically what this series is going to be about. But without further ado, I'm going to bring in the one man who's written more stories than Paul S. Newman. It's the one and only Chuck Dixon.
Hey, you Chuck. Again?
I know.
Wasn't I just talking to you?
No, it didn't happen.
Okay.
If there's no pictures, it didn't happen.
Oh man, I must have dreamt it.
We were rolling along really, really nicely there, and then I get this message from Facebook that says, if you don't go live within 10 minutes, we're gonna, erase your thing. And I'm like, what do you mean? We've been talking here. And I look at it and I see the go live button. I didn't hit it. Well, if anybody's watched my 31 Days of Monsters, you'll remember early on in that series, I was constantly knocking myself out of the stream because my finger would slide across my mouse and it would swap the page out. So I'd have to sign back in really quick. And people were turning it into a drinking game.
Keep your hands to yourself, Graham.
Oh my gosh. I go 2 weeks without a stream and I lose all my skills. So
there you go.
Sue me. So anyway, Chuck, obviously a very, very prolific comic writer, but he's also a writer of prose. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Chuck, was how do you approach those two different disciplines? How do you see them differently when you're writing comics versus writing prose?
Well, comics are basically in my DNA because I studied them so much as a kid, same as you. Mm-hmm. I figure out how this stuff works. And the comics come more naturally to me. I had to kind of learn how to write prose. I'd read hundreds and hundreds of novels, but, reading and writing are two different things, two different parts of the brain. So the biggest difference, obviously, is I don't have an artist to rely on. So I've got to create pictures in the reader's imagination. And I found the less you describe, the better, because readers they draw those pictures or create those pictures in their head very quickly, based on very little knowledge. A man enters a room, that's the line, and they're already picturing the guy and the room. So you kind of got to get all that stuff out of the way in a hurry. And, whereas, when from a script, when I'm describing something, it's very practical, very direct, very, ABC, so that, you or another artist will know exactly what I'm looking for in that panel. Mm-hmm. The other big difference is in a comic, you're set to a page length, 22, 20 pages, whatever. In novels, it's open-ended. And I often find myself surprised that I'm writing and I'll go, wow, this is the last chapter, because there's really no more story after this. And because I didn't have to think of that or write toward that length, a lot of times the endings creep up on me. So those are the two major differences.
Okay, that's interesting. One of the things I always admired about you is that you could take any assignment. Like you could go to Chuck Dixon and say, I need a Batman story, and you could write a Batman story. You could say, I need a My Pretty Pony story. You could write a My Pretty Pony story. I need a comic about NASCAR. You could write a NASCAR story. You don't know anything about My Pretty Pony or NASCAR,
No.
but you can write that stuff because that's what you do. You're a professional writer. Now, me as a writer, I write stuff that I know that I can do, or that I have interest in doing. I couldn't take an assignment like My Pretty Pony or a NASCAR story, since I have no interest in either of those things, and write a compelling story for it. So I'm curious how you do that. How do you approach material that you have no either interest in or knowledge of?
I love the medium. I love the comic book medium. I love everything about it. And that's really what I love the most. I mean, a lot of people, they go to work in comics because, oh, I love Spider-Man, or I love this, or, well, I loved all that stuff too. But what I mostly loved was the medium. And I like to see any kind of story told in it. And because that's my first love, the medium, not a particular genre or a particular set of characters, I never specialized. I was never the horror guy, the superhero guy. I was whatever you threw my way. And for me, that's the challenge: is how do how do I take something like The Forgotten Man or Clinton Cash and turn that into a comic book? And that's when I get jazzed up. It's like, how do I translate this material into the medium I love? And I mean, I did have to write a NASCAR book one time. I was assigned a Superman.
I know, that's why I brought it up.
A Superman at NASCAR, and I knew very little about NASCAR, and so it was Bob Greenberger, I believe. No, Paul Kupperberg put me in touch with someone from NASCAR, and I said, "Look, I got to write this thing in a hurry. All these guys are good old boys, right? Because I basically just need to know how they talk to each other." And they said, "Yeah, they're all just good old boys." I said, "Fine," and then I just went at it, because I understood, the basis for the humor and everything else without, and it's a Superman story. How much NASCAR history are you looking for in a Superman story?
Yeah, I'd forgotten that Superman was in it.
Yeah.
I thought it might be one of those like corporate, tie-in type thing.
It was for I think it was a Kmart deal.
Oh, okay.
It came with a T-shirt. It was probably one of the biggest selling comics I ever worked on. You had to go to Kmart to buy it. So,
wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, by not specializing, it's given me longevity in this business because, I'm writing so many diverse, different kinds of projects now that I wouldn't have been able to if I just, concentrate on superheroes and wrote nothing else.
Right. I mean, you probably do have a reputation as like a action writer,
Right.
like Two-Fisted Tales type of action writer. All your stuff has a very unique aspect to it, I guess.
Right.
You can always spot, a Chuck story because, there's a lot of action in it. You're not overly verbose in your dialogue.
Right.
You let the pictures tell the story, and I think that definitely, says something about, how you approach it.
Yeah. The book on me is, I'm an action writer, but, again, I don't specialize. I mean, I've written a lot of humor too. I've written
Right.
Simpsons and SpongeBob and stuff like that. So editors, editors that know the full range of what I can do will reach out for me. But, mostly they just reach out and say, well, this guy can write a bloody mess.
Right.
So, and the thing with action is it's not necessarily violence, it's action. I just, because comics are such a visual medium and they're so kinetic, I just feel there's a need to show the characters doing things all the time.
Right.
Even if it's not conflict, it's something going on.
Well, that's one of the whole aspects of visual storytelling is you show the action, you don't tell it.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm adapting a novel right now in which the novel is written as plot advancement, action, plot advancement, action. Doesn't work with comics. So he'll have scenes where the characters are like explaining stuff to each other in a static setting, and then move on to do some action thing.
Right.
Well, my job is to move that dialogue to the action sequences.
Right, right.
So if they're sailing a ship or loading a truck or whatever, they're talking while they're doing that, not while
Right,
they're having breakfast.
right, right. Yeah, there's motion going on. One of the things I learned when I was doing uh, the soap opera strip
Yeah.
was that there's so much talking, you know, and I had to, I was constantly trying to figure out ways to not have them sitting at a dining room table or not have them just standing outside a building, you know. I would do stuff like if they were standing outside of a building, there was a park across the street, and in the foreground there was a mime juggling, you know.
Well, your effort there, that paid off because I would, I couldn't follow the strip all the time because it didn't appear locally, but whenever I would see it, I go, man, there's Graham, man, sweating the details, because there would be something in there that would carry the eye instead of just people yapping, because that strip was people yapping
Yeah.
day after day after day after day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you always made it, either shifting up angles or, like you said, putting a little bit of business in the foreground or the background, or just having the people in motion. You did a very admirable job on a thankless assignment.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. It was definitely a challenge, but I learned a lot by doing that too, by studying guys like Alex Kotsky and Stan Drake
Sure.
and uh, what's the guy's name?
What Leonard Starr is the one
Leonard
I would
Starr.
name next.
That's it. Leonard Starr. That was the other one I was trying to think of. All those guys, they really knew how to make something out of nothing and make it interesting,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and that is because, you and I both understand, as did Leonard Starr and Kotsky and Stan Drake and the rest of them, that comics are an immediate experience. Every panel must delight, intrigue, make you curious. It has to do something. It's not
Right.
like movies and TV where you can rely on music and acting and all the rest of it. We've got to basically keep your attention panel by panel, a series of static images.
Right.
So, and I think that's a lot of what gets forgotten in the comic craft, is that, these things have to, shout for your attention with every effort, but not look like they're doing it. But
Right. Particularly, a lot of comics you see today is that, the guys writing and drawing them are like wannabe Hollywood, and they
yeah,
don't realize that those two mediums are not the same thing.
no,
As you had indicated, in a film, you have motion, you have sound, and you have music to
right,
enhance emotion and stuff like that. Uh, in comics, you have a two-dimensional art form that you have to make people think is three-dimensional, and that's the trick. So the three things that I think are integral is clarity, dynamics, and immersion. If you have clarity and you have the dynamics in the story, you can immerse your reader into it. And that's the key to a great story, is the one that you read and you don't realize you've just given up 25 minutes of your life, you know.
and the trick there is to not work too broad, not be too on the nose all the time. And that's something, another thing I see wrong in a lot of comics. But because it is kind of a broad medium, it's got to be a universal medium, and the natural inclination is to make things too obvious. Never, but there's lots of room for nuance in comics if you know what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I always point to an article I read where Stan used to tell his artists to study silent film, because you watch some of those great silent films. The acting, may seem over the top, but it's like theater acting where you act for the back row.
Right.
And that particular style is perfect to evince emotions in a two-dimensional art form, because if you're too tricky, you're not getting it across. But when you have those passionate moments, and you're like John Buscema in the How to Draw Marvel Comics,
Right.
shows that there's the punch that most people will do, or if you still do a photograph still, But then there's, the Kirby punch or the Gil Kane punch where you're wound up and you're twisted and the body is twisted
Right.
and all that kinetic energy in the drawing translates into action. That's the stuff I love about particularly old comics was that energy that was there, the cartooning instead of just illustration.
Yeah, and the attention to, I mean, these guys were cartoonists, and we've talked about this before. These guys were cartoonists, but they also were students of human behavior. So, I've said this before. You've always agreed with me, and you'll agree with me now.
Well, that's because I know better.
Because Jack Kirby is always known as out there and coming off the page at you, and everything's turned up to 11. But he was so good at smaller moments, somebody lighting a cigarette or opening a car door for a woman or things like this. And it looked very, very natural when he drew it because he was a student of life. He would see this stuff and know how to make it look natural. I mean, when Scott Beatty and I wrote Robin Year One, we wrote it not knowing who's going to be drawing. And when they said, well, we've assigned this guy Javier Pulido. Well, both of us went online and we're looking at Javier Pulido artwork. And we both agreed, we got to rewrite this. This guy is so good at body language and nuance, just the subtleties that we got to rewrite. We got to take out half the dialogue because it's unnecessary. This guy can put it across without us, drawing the reader's eye to it. He's going to do it on his own. And, we rewrote the whole first issue before that we would let them give it to him. But, that's an example of, not only collaboration, but working the nuance, knowing how to work the subtleties of the medium.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, I remember seeing certain artists, like you had said, Kirby definitely had nuance. I just saw a pencil page of his. It was from one of the New Gods type thing, and it was like a Wonderland or a Funland type of splash page. And I'm looking now. It wasn't particularly. It was inked by Vinnie Coletta, so it wasn't like key Kirby. But looking at all the little background details, like there's a bandstand up there, and it's in a different perspective than some of the other things. But the perspective is right. It's just going back to a different vanishing point. Yeah. And then so you've got a guy with a tuba on there. And you've got a guy, with a horn, and they're holding it properly. And they're just little figures,
right?
And he's drawn the tuba. It's like he's not going to take the time for that tiny little figure to go in a book and look at a tuba reference. No. He's going to draw what he thinks a tuba is going to look like to get that up across on such a tiny little thing, and he nails it every time.
Yeah, the guy obviously had like an eidetic memory for visuals. I mean, he was one of those guys. He must have been able to see something once and just be able to draw it from memory. Because I remember reading an interview with him once, and he said that he loved looking through catalogs of car parts and things like that, and he would just put those images in his head. And so when he needed to draw some wacky piece of machinery in Fantastic Four, he could draw on a manifold for a Ford V8.
Right.
And then put it on its side, and then it's a spaceship now.
Do you remember in, I think it was X-Men #1, there was a sequence where like Marvel Girl was putting together, I think it was a Winchester rifle, and it was clearly the schematic. Like it's probably a paste up of the schematic where you take all the parts and you pull them out like that, and then the lines going through where the screws went and the pieces and everything. And it was just like, oh my God, that is so good, but he probably lifted it from a schematic, but I'd never seen anything like that before, especially that early on in comics.
Yeah, my dad was a gunsmith. He used to have a whole shelf full of those shooters' Bibles, and that's what they were. Once a year it would come out, and every new gun model would have an exploded view. But my dad had an eidetic memory as well. Eventually, he threw all those books away. He didn't need them anymore.
Wow.
Up here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That brings me up to a question. It's actually a statement, and you tell me if you agree with this or not, that artists and writers, maybe particularly, I would say both of them, are participants, artists and writers are uh, observers of life,
Yeah.
not participants.
No, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I mean, whatever. I took that Robert McKee course,
Hmm.
and at the end of it, I don't know if he does this every time, but at the end of it, he said, whatever made you a writer, that made you stand outside of life and watch rather than participate. You should be thankful for that. It's not a disability.
Right.
It's not a drawback. And I mean, I spent a lot of time when I was a kid in hospitals. So I was kind of an outsider, even amongst my own group of kids, because I didn't see them very often. And I think that's what turned me into an observer.
That's interesting. I didn't take the McKee course, but that was just an observation of my own that I came up with because I noticed myself in various situations observing things, looking at details, listening to words, and but not hearing sometimes the conversations. Like I'm sort of checked out.
Right.
If I don't have an immediate interest in what's going on, sometimes I'm checking out and observing what is being unfolding in front of me.
Yeah.
And I'll bring something up sometime to people like or Julie or something like that, and I said, "Do you notice that table setting, the knife there, the tong was bent? It's how do you notice these things? It's like because I don't know why, but
Yeah.
little nuances like how somebody holds a cup, puts their finger out, you know, little things like that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's part of what makes you an artist. And I think you just naturally you're looking for that stuff. It's like when I'll listen to conversations, if I'm out.
Hmm.
I'll listen to the people in front of me in line at Target talking, because there might be something there. You
Oh
know,
yeah, I do the same thing. I'll hear conversations. I listen to accents. I listen to idioms. You know, different things that are getting used. It's all part of the package.
yeah,
Even
even
into your library.
yeah, because even common turns of phrase, because as a writer, you're sitting there all day long going, "Is there another way to say this?"
Right.
Constantly asking yourself, "Is there another way to say this?" And you kind of draw from conversations you've ever heard or someone well, what they might have said in this situation,
Mhm.
to give the language its own flow. I mean, and that's another big difference between comics and prose. So much comics dialogue has to be on the money, and it has to be terse.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of room for poetry in comics.
Right.
Whereas in a prose novel, I have to remind myself to stop the characters from talking.
Do you find yourself when you're writing dialogue in comics, like, uh, obviously there's deadlines, so uh, you'll write a piece of dialogue just to get the flavor of the discussion in there, and then you'll come back for that turning of the phrase type of thing afterwards,
No,
or are you so
uh,
you just nail it right off?
I gotta sweat it. I gotta sweat it right then and there.
Do you?
It's got to go along with the visuals, because the words inform the visuals inform the words. I can't, you know, I might lay a page out, the panel descriptions, and go back and dialogue it,
Hmm.
but I never do placement dialogue because that would make me nuts.
Interesting.
That would bother me that I just wrote, "Hey, I'm happy today," instead of something more clever than
Right.
that, or more subtle than that, or
Right.
more to the character than that.
Hmm.
Because it's like I remember there was uh, it was years ago on a fanzine, and I got to see it was a panel from an Avengers comic Stan Lee wrote, and for some reason the character had to be changed in it, and I can't remember who the original character was. It might have been the Vision, and it had to be changed to Hawkeye. I don't know why. And they showed both panels with the rewritten dialogue, and I was like, "Whoa!" The characters have an entirely different voice, and Stan knew that. He had to change the way they talked because Hawkeye wouldn't say it the same way Vision did.
Right.
That really opened my mind to this stuff. Because in my day, when you went to write comics, there was nobody to tell you how it was done. I didn't know what a comic script looked like. I didn't
Right.
know how at all what the process was like. So any little glimpse into that process was pure gold to me.
Yeah, that's the one thing that advantage we have is that the uh, the the education's right there in front of us.
Yeah,
It's every great comic you ever read. You just have to take the time to deconstruct it.
yeah, just hours and hours of staring at those pages. How
Yeah,
did they do that? How did they evince this emotion in me? You
yeah,
know, and for you, I mean, obviously it's the same thing. I mean, panel composition, stuff like that. It would bewilder the hell out of me. I mean, I intuit enough of it to be able to write for comics.
mm,
I mean, I can envision the most amazing comic pages in my head. I couldn't draw them to save my life, but in my head they're there. So that I can see the page as I'm writing. It's not going to
right,
turn out the way that I saw it, but that's okay. I don't care about that. But
right,
but at least I know, because a lot of artists have said you never put much dialogue in, or not to put too much in. I'm like, yeah, because you can't have panel 9, the earth explodes. There's no room. you, you've got to know what that page looks like. You've got to understand the real estate that the artist has to deal with.
right. But you have a very good visual sense, though, too. I mean, I've worked with writers. One of the things that uh, isn't taught, but it seems the good writers know it intuitively, is that you can't have more than two actions in a single panel.
Yeah,
You can't have the clown riding a bike, juggling with one hand and shooting, a bad guy with the other hand, but meanwhile a plane is crashing in the background. You
yeah.
know, you water down the effect of any of the action that you're trying to get across, and B, you're going to kill the artist because there's no way to make that look interesting outside of maybe a Mad Magazine panel, and then it starts to look goofy.
Well, there's an artist we both know who called me in a panic one day because he had a new writer on the book he was working on. And he says, listen to this panel description. Catwoman blinks. How do I make her blink?
You do it as a 3-panel triptych. You have the eyes wide open, halfway down, boom.
Which won't look like a blink because
Yeah,
it doesn't work. You can't do it in comics. It's
it looks
crazy.
like he's falling asleep.
I mean, I remember, Flynn Henry, our good friend Flynn Henry. I went over to his place one day and he was showing me a page, and it was, a futuristic city, panel 1, futuristic city, and it describes this futuristic city, Blade Runner type place, all these details. Panel 2, closer in. Panel 3, closer in. He goes, I got to draw this goddamn city 3 times. What do I do? And I said, splash page.
Yeah.
All at once.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah. One of the things that I always took to heart was Will Eisner had said that once the script leaves the writer's hand, the story now belongs to the artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you want to do justice to the writer and get his vision across, but you can't handicap yourself by the limitations of the writer when it comes to visuals.
Right.
You have to expand upon it to push forward the idea of what is happening, but make it better and more dynamic if possible.
Yeah, I was talking to a Tyro writer a while back. He was just getting into the comic book industry, and he was complaining that his first story for this company was ruined by the artist because he didn't do everything like the writer had asked.
Oh,
Well, who's the artist? He says, Dan Jurgens. I said, listen, Dan Jurgens did not ruin your story. You're a new guy in this business. Dan Jurgens fixed your story. Dan Jurgens made you look like a freaking genius. You should be thanking Dan Jurgens instead of complaining to me about Dan Jurgens. And I said, in lesson 2, don't complain about a freelancer to another freelancer. We're a brotherhood.
Yeah.
We don't complain about each other.
It's a small business.
It's a very small business. And if you're going to be in it for any length of time, you got to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So, what was your favorite comic as a kid, and why?
It's hard to say. I think the one that I really fell in love with was Spider-Man, Ditko Spider-Man. I had to read every issue. I really, it's, I was, you talked about immersion. I was fully immersed in that world. And, I think it's that Ditko run has served as a template. Every time I go to do superheroes, I refer back to that run of how to balance action, emotion, heart, the supporting cast, everything in it. They kept that book moving forward month after month after month. Because even when you got a complete story, there were enough elements in that story that made you want to come back next month to see what happened with Betty Brant, or would he ever meet Mary Jane,
Right.
that kind of stuff. Did Jonah Jameson mean it when he fired him? Is it permanent this time? That kind of stuff. And it's kind of a template. The other big thing for me was Creepy and Eerie, the Warren horror comics.
Right.
That was my first exposure to Archie Goodwin, who is kind of, even before I worked with him, was my mentor. Even before I met him, was my mentor, because Archie could balance the words and the pictures.
Yeah, Archie is so good.
Yeah.
I never read a bad Archie story.
No. And that's another guy. You could drop him in the middle of nowhere. You could drop him in the middle of a series and say, we need this in a hurry. And he'd write that. Because he told me he went to see Stan to get a job. And Stan said, when can you start? And he goes, well, I don't know, anytime. He goes, can you start now? And he says, what do you mean now? He's like, right now. And Archie's like, yeah, I guess so. And he goes, Gene Colan's waiting for pages. He needs to get started on the next Iron Man story. So Archie sits down and they in like the reception area, and he's writing on a legal pad, and he writes all this stuff. And then he gets on the phone with Gene. He goes, I'm your new writer. And they'd worked together before. They'd worked at Warren. So he says, oh, great. What's the story, Archie? And Archie starts telling him the story. And he gets like a paragraph in, and Gene says, is that it? Archie says, no, there's more. And he reads them a little bit more, and Gene goes, is that it? He goes, no, there's a little more, Gene. Reads him a little more. Gene's like, that's it. That's the story, right? And Archie's like, I got 3 more pages. But I said, yeah, Gene, that's the story.
Is that because he was so used to working with Stan and the sparse plots?
Exactly.
That's funny. That's funny. I remember those Archie. That was on the early run of Iron Man after he broke off of Tales of Suspense.
Yeah,
Archie came in really early on.
Well, there's a Hulk story where Archie told me that they threw him on the Hulk. They just said, there's nobody to write the Hulk, because at that time nobody wanted to write the Hulk. They had to chase writers down and make them write the Hulk. Mm-hmm. And they had nobody that month, so they just threw Archie. We need a script by tomorrow. And Archie came up with this story. You'll remember it well, where Hydra captures the Hulk and shrinks him.
I know that one.
That story is genius. If anybody watching has never read that story, you've got to find it. It is genius.
Yeah.
Hydra
shrinks the rat on the cover.
Hulk's fighting a giant rat.
Yeah.
And so they shrink, basically the Hulk down to the size of an action figure. And Hydra thinks that by doing this, they can control him. And they take him back to Hydra headquarters. And of course, Hulk's still the Hulk. So he kicks all their asses, even though he's only like 4 inches tall.
Yeah. He just gets madder, and then he's stronger, and he flips guys up.
And Hydra's rising level of frustration at their plans failing. It's an hysterical issue.
That is awesome. And Herb Trimpe art in there is great.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Severin Inks. So
yeah, those two were great together, because Trimpe is such an underrated artist, maybe because of his styling. But his storytelling was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, his characterizations, his level of rising destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Stories, genius.
Also, his cinematic, almost like storyboards. How like sometimes an action thing. I remember one time the Hulk was falling from space, and he had this tiny little dot, and then the next panel,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the panels are getting bigger and bigger, and then there's an explosion on the ground, and then there's an angled panel of the Hulk now, because it was Bruce Banner falling, the Hulk coming up out of the ground, because he had changed on the way down, and that's how he
Right,
survived.
right.
And it's just very cinematic and wonderful.
Yeah, he would do a lot of that stuff.
Mhm.
Because I think, I mean, he was a superhero guy, but he was looking at a lot of the war comics because he was in his heart really wanted to draw war comics.
Yeah, airplane stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and he loved, I mean, I know he was looking at Kubert and Heath and what they were doing at the same time over at DC, which was all really cinematic stuff.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. He deserves more praise, because as a storyteller, he's just amazing.
yeah, yeah, and he was a hell of a guy too.
Yeah.
I got to talk with him quite a bit. He would come down to Florida quite often. And once he got back into the con scene, and he was a
Yeah.
blast to hang out with.
Yeah. He used to come with his wife to those cons, and she was a sweetheart too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice people.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your favorite comic. Now, who was your favorite artist? I think we already know the answer to that.
Ditko. Ditko is the reason I write comics. I
Yeah.
wanted to be Ditko. I just loved everything that he did. From Spider-Man to Doctor Strange, and then we went over to Warren Comics. I mean, I already loved Warren Comics, and here my favorite artist shows up at Warren Comics to do the best work of his career.
Right.
Incredible horror stories written by
Those
Archie.
are amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
He did all those gray tones and stuff.
Oh, the story about the guy astral projecting blew my mind when I was a kid. Just totally blew my mind.
Have you seen this?
Oh my God, that's a picture of Ditko.
Yeah, that's Ditko in the army.
So that's like now there's like 4 pictures of Ditko.
There's a Facebook page that his nephew runs, and he's been showing posting all kinds of family pictures of Ditko.
Oh, I gotta find that.
Yeah, there's even some video of Ditko at like family gatherings.
Well, D. Mulaney wrote a biography of Ditko that never got published because remember Eclipse had that flood.
Oh yeah,
all the material got lost. But he had pictures. He visited Ditko's family in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and they showed him the high school yearbook. And he said he got chills because there's a picture of Steve Ditko in chemistry class. He's got the glasses, the sweater vest, and he's actually holding up a test tube.
I've seen that picture.
And behind him is this big, bluff, blonde kid in a varsity sweater. It's like, it's Peter Parker and Flash Thompson in a photograph.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is really cool. All right. So, who was your favorite writer as a kid?
Well, Archie was the first guy I noticed. I mean, I didn't really notice writers because they didn't sign their names, Right. But I knew Stan. But Stan was there all the time. He was like a constant. He was like the sun coming up.
Right.
I really didn't think about whether or not I liked his writing or not because he was there, and I liked the books, I liked the characters, but I didn't really think about him and what his contribution was till later.
Right.
But Archie was, was and is my favorite comic book writer of all time.
I just realized that you weren't on the screen.
Well, how
you can admire my beauty.
Well, I gotta have my screen time, Graham. We talked about
this. Chuck sends me nasty notes if he doesn't get enough screen time, folks.
Oh yeah. I want the world to see me. So important.
Oh, that's funny. Hey, let's check in on the chat room here. I think we had some glitches. Not, and they're not my fault either, folks. I'm just saying. These were issues on YouTube. People were having a hard time watching it or something like that. So let's see here. We got a lot of people in here. Rob Fellows. We got a bunch of folks from the old 31 Days of Monsters in here. Good to see. How you guys do? I see here. I'm getting blamed. Did Graham even get a chance to start, or has this error been here the whole time? See, my fans are going to blame me.
Yeah.
Because they know how often I screw up these things. Remember, guys, it's a good drinking game. Let's see if there's any questions for Chuck here. Oh, Dr. Mask, why do you say that? YouTube loves me.
Now's the time
Not
to say
enough to monetize me, but
if you do have questions for me, I do have my own YouTube channel where I answer questions every week. So
that's right. Yeah, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe to Chuck's YouTube. It's fascinating to hear the backstories here on, and he answers your questions that you pose to him too.
Sometimes I get myself in trouble answering those questions because you can't shut up.
Have you?
No, not really.
Oh.
John Trent at Bounding in the Comics sort of tries to get me in trouble. I talked about our idea for the 50s Captain America.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. I saw the article. Yes, I can see you in the chat, Rob. But here's hey,
Rob hasn't had a haircut since
Chuck can come up with stories on the fly on any genre. We're working on a webtoon, and I thought he was going to give me something he had in his inventory, but no, he came up with a whole new concept at a moment's notice. That's our boy.
Wow.
Blink twice if Chuck is holding you against your will. I did it 3 times in case you couldn't see it because of the reflection. Hey, our pal Dennis Shoemate is here.
Dennis.
Good to see you, Dennis. And I was doing so well with the tech snafus too.
The gorilla fingers.
Yeah. Hey, here's old Sergio. Hey, Serge.
Hey. Bo is here. Bo is where?
Yeah, where's Bo? I haven't seen Bo. David Williams, can you draw a chicken? No, I can't draw a chicken. Why would I have to draw a chicken?
I think he means, can you lure a chicken?
I would take a photograph of a chicken and I would trace it.
There's Bo.
There's Bo.
I'm going to put a chicken in the next story I write for you. Panel 1.
In a helicopter.
Panel 1, Day, the coop.
Chinu chewing on the power cables. I guess that's in reference to all the stuff that's been going on.
I like the werewolf and a ball cap.
Yeah, isn't that great? It looks like it's an action figure.
That's a good look. It looks like Bo when he's angry.
Oh, that little rock says he recently got a copy of Winter World. Amazing.
Isn't that artwork gorgeous? The guy was a genius.
Yeah, I have. I think I have 2 originals from Winter World. What's his name?
Jorge Zafino.
Jorge. Yeah, that Jorge had done.
Yeah, I think I was the intermediary there because he was trading with American artists, and I think I offered you that opportunity. I'm sure.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
He used the cheapest paper. It's this flimsy bond paper or something. It is horrible.
I think they wrapped steaks down in it in Argentina. Yeah, really, it was crap paper.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, what he could do with it, wow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And if he used better paper, because boy, he punished the paper. I mean,
oh yeah. Aaron Lepresti says, Chuck, get a haircut.
I wish. I really want to. Apparently, you've had one from your picture, Aaron. Yeah, I haven't had a haircut in 6 months.
Aaron and I share the same barber. Obviously. He's a little too gung-ho, but, you know, we're rocking the look, Aaron. We're rocking it, brother.
Oh, God. Yeah, I got to get out of here. I'm sick of this.
This guy is busting my balls. Not a Graham Nolan stream without some tech issues.
Wow.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
Leave my friend alone.
Do we have any plans of doing a Joe Frankenstein sequel?
Have you won the lottery?
The short answer is yes. We left enough Easter eggs in there to go on with it. We'll see how some of this crowdfunding continues to go for like my Compass comics, and if that happens, then we'll definitely do another one.
I'm up for it.
Yeah.
That was fun.
So let's see. I wanted to. Show people a Chuck script. Hello, Statistical Zero. Good to see you. This is a page from Bane Conquest that Chuck had written, just so you could take a look at what he puts in as far as his descriptions. Bane, Trog, and Zombie cross a cellar area toward a bank of elevators. They are Soviet era and resemble freight elevators more than residential elevators. Short, succinct, to the point, gives me just about everything I need.
But it also leaves you room.
Right.
You know, it's like whatever that means to you, that's what you're going to draw. But the thing
Right.
is, because I know who I'm writing it for, because I know it's you, because we're experienced together, I know, I don't have to go into great detail. I don't have to worry that you're going to muff that shot.
Right. I may muff it. Bane arches his back, head back, his mouth a tight line, the veins, his neck stand out. Whatever visual cues you want to use to convey that the venom is working. Bane climbs a rusting ladder inside the dark, dank, greasy elevator shaft. He's climbing towards us, leaving Trog and Zombie below, and then looking down into the shaft at Bane. So Chuck is giving a actual camera angle there, too. It's a thermal shot. The surroundings and shades from the midnight blue to indigo. Bane glows in warm shades. Well, those are color notations, too.
Which I should know better than to put in a script, because so many colorists don't read the script.
So here's the page. Let's see here. Wrong one. Okay. So the only thing I changed on here is in the second panel. Oops, that's not the right one. What did I do here? Let me do this. Okay. Is that Bane drawing on the screen?
Yeah. It's the right page.
Okay. Panel 2. The description was Trog uses a pry bar to pry open the doors of one elevator. Zombie waves a high-tech wand over the elevator controls. Bane stands in the foreground making an adjustment to his venom levels. So I editorially took Zombie out of that sequence. I took the crowbar out because I wanted to show the strength of Trog, that he would just lift that thing. But the main focus was to have visual focus. The way I saw this sequence was to focus on Bane, because he's doing an action that is very subtle. It's almost like we talked about with the blink.
Yeah.
He pressing a button is not a great action to try and draw. Which is why I changed his delivery device here to this ratchet thing, so that we could do like a twist thing and maybe even have like a motion thing, to kind of indicate it. But
the thing is, this is an example. I mean, you made all the right choices, because, as an artist, you're going to spend a lot more time with this page than I would. So a writer in comics has to learn to trust their artist's instincts. As I always said, as long as you make me look like a genius, we're fine.
That's right. And again, the artist's job is to enhance the story, but also make clear the writer's intent.
Yeah, because like when I worked at Marvel, but I stopped writing Marvel style about 2 issues into Savage Sword of Conan,
Hmm.
because I would get pages back and I had no idea what the people were saying, and I had no emotional connection to the characters. And also, the pages appeared under dramatized to me because the artist had no idea what they would be saying. So the characters were either calm and benign or enraged. There was no subtlety in between.
Right.
My regular artist was Gary Quapis, and I said, let me write full script. I promise you, the end product is going to be better,
Hmm.
because you'll be informed of the emotional, content of the characters as the story progresses.
Hmm.
And Gary had to reluctantly agree with me after he was done. And so every time I ever did that, had to do that again, and I had to write Marvel style for Johnny Romita Jr. and Joe Kubert because they insisted on it. I said, I'll do it, but I'm going to put all the dialogue in. So you have all it, so you know where they are emotionally throughout the story.
That's smart.
Well, I mean, it was the only way I could work, because it
Yeah.
made me nuts to get back these Xeroxes. I would have nightmares about drawing word balloons, because you would actually physically draw them on the page. I had nightmares where I was drawing word balloons on original artwork.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just really, I hated it. I
Wow.
hated the whole idea of it. It was so unnatural.
Well, here's another page. This is a traditional 6-panel grid, which Chuck loves.
I love the grids.
He loves the grids, and I love them too, because there's no hiding bad storytelling in a grid. A lot of guys push stuff out of the panels, or they'll do wonky angles and stuff like that to kind of cover up mistakes, to draw your eye away from the things they couldn't get across. When you do a grid like this, it's like reading a storyboard. You got to follow along. So when Chuck writes those pages, I always dive into those with gusto.
Yeah,
So in
because
this one, we have Catwoman crouches low in the shadows atop that elevator and watches Bane climb past. She's geared up for larceny. The senses of her mask or goggles glow. Panel 2, closer shot of Catwoman crouched in the shadows. She's frowning deeply. She's withdrawing into the dark like a cat hiding under a bed. Panel 3, she lies atop the elevator in the extreme foreground, looking up to where Bane, several floors above, is climbing upwards. Panel 4, and obviously there's dialogue here. I'm just not reading it. Back to Bird and Dionysus. Bird raises from the chair, setting aside a magazine as Dionysus calls to him from the computer console. Bird leans on the console, looking up at the monitors. We look past him to see Dionysus raising a spidery limb. Dionysus smiles a nasty smile. Panel 6, tight shot closer on Dionysus. We see the tip of a syringe has emerged from the end of one of his digits. A drip of solution drops from the angled tip of the needle. Obviously, I changed that somewhat because this character was one who's all wired up. He's more machine than he is anything else. He's a head, basically, with machine parts. And I just felt it seemed out of character for him to use a syringe when he could just plug something into the guy and shock him. So that's the only change that I did on this page here.
What's an example of what I said before? You made me look like a genius. So I'm not going to complain. Oh, he changed my work. Yeah, he made it better.
Well, it offers a little more action too.
Yeah.
Than a needle going in. The guy getting an electric shock. There's.
Well, these are the things that you think about, because you got to turn it into pictures.
Right.
I just got to think of pictures. Anybody can do that. I'm actually going to make it work on a page. So I understand a lot of writers, when they get the artwork back, will compare their script to the art. I have never compared my script to the art when it came back. I just look at it and go, yeah, it looks fantastic.
Do you when the artwork comes back, do you compare the dialogue to make sure that the drawings now represent the intent and the emotional through line that you're trying to get across?
Yeah, I might alter dialogue or suggest dropping dialogue, as I said before. If a guy's saying, I'm really pissed, and it's obvious he's really pissed. Well, he doesn't have to say it. So I'll
Right.
have him say something else, because the emotions conveyed in the art. When you're working and you don't know who you're working with, you don't know who's going to be drawing it. It's harder because you're
Right.
putting stuff that you wouldn't put in if you knew. Like, one of my first published stories at Marvel was a Western, and I went into all this detail in every panel, and then John Severin drew it. I didn't have to write any of that. I mean, I could have had guy rides down a street on a horse, and that would have been plenty. I didn't have to go into what kind of horse and what kind of saddle, because John was going to do it absolutely splendidly.
Exactly.
But the thing is, when you're working with somebody you don't know who you're working with, or even more complicated, you're working with someone to whom English is a second language.
Right.
You got a lot more into descriptions.
Now, in case any of you out there watching the show think that Chuck and I are friends, I now have proof positive that we are not friends. This is a page from The Expendables Go to Hell. The hardest project I ever worked on. Now, I'm going to read to you what my friend wrote for me. Barney is picking up a discarded MP40 and ammo pouches from a dead German. Audie looks off panel as Tommy in his fists. That's Audie Murphy. Okay, so I've got Barney, who is Sylvester Stallone. I've got Audie Murphy. I've got an MP40. I got ammo pouches and a dead German soldier. So now I've got all that reference in that one panel. The two trot down a road lined with smoking ruins. The buildings could be anything and everything, from modern to buildings from the past. Be conscious of the height difference between the two. Audie was a little guy. Okay, not too bad. He's throwing me a bone there. Murphy looks angry as he walks, eyes wary and looking off panel. Barney walks by him, speaking earnestly. Again, that's a thank you panel. That's a friend. That's what friends do right there. Murphy stands off panel, pulling back the bolt on the Tommy. Barney is still speaking and regarding him. Okay, seems like our relationship is great. Now, somewhere between panel 1 and panel 5, I piss this guy off. Low angle shot, looking past Barney and Murphy's booted feet in the extreme foreground. The street is packed with charging figures brandishing weapons. There's Aztecs, reference. Huns, reference. Vikings, reference. Warriors in demonic samurai armor. Not just samurai armor, but their demonic samurai armor. Looming above and behind is an Assyrian war elephant with arrows streaming from an armored houdah. That, my friends, is one panel.
And you did it.
And I did it. But when I was done, I think I called Chuck up and I said, "You son of a bitch! I kill you!" Every one of the I drew this digitally, so every one of these characters I drew large and then shrank down so that I could get the details on them.
Look at that. There you go. You're a better man for having drawn that page. Helping. Tough love.
Now I know how Audie Murphy felt when he went to war.
A writer's example of the same thing is I took over the book Alien Legion from another writer, and my first issue was plotted by him and drawn, and I had the dialogue. So I'm dialoguing another guy's plot, Marvel style. I really don't know what the characters are saying.
Oh, wow.
And Larry Stroman does this page at the climax where this guy has the drop on the lead character. And in the original plot line, this character goes in this long thing about why he has to kill this character. And it's this long thing going back to his childhood and trauma. I mean, it's like this guy's biography. Huh. And Larry Stroman leaves me like, this much room for a word balloon. It's this tiny little panel with the guy holding the gun saying something. And I was like, I can't fit all that in here. So I just changed it to, if I don't kill you, I'll lose my job.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, look at that page. My God, it's gorgeous.
That one was a fun. I mean, it was a hard page, but I really liked the way it came out.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And the coloring came out really cool on it too.
Yeah.
Oh, Sergio's lost power. He's got to go start his generator.
Oh my gosh. Well, he's down closer to the water.
Okay.
Yeah. Poor guy. Poor Sergio. Near the water in Florida. Poor guy.
Yeah. I'm feeling really bad. Chuck, if you had the chance to write any public domain pulp golden age character, which one would you choose?
Oh boy. It has to be public domain.
Yes.
I don't know. Sergio does comics about Jesus. Uh, um, yeah, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank here. I mean, there's Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that. I just, I don't know. Probably a historical figure.
Historical. Okay.
Graphic novel about, George Custer, something like that.
Graham Nolan, do you change your panel based on the amount of dialogue in the script? Space. Yeah, you have to. When you're working full script, you know what the dialogue is. So, you really should lay out your panel so that the placement of the balloons actually enhances the story too, and enhances the story flow. So it's very important. That's another reason, because when you work Marvel style, and a writer decides he's going to get very verbose in something and you didn't leave him the room, now they're covering up art and you got balloons going here, there with connectors going to it because you got different people talking. That can be a problem.
And also, you're drawing it in Marvel style. You're drawing it and you have a sense of the story. And a lot of times the writer doesn't have the same sense. I mean, I saw a Frank Robbins issue of Luke Cage recently, and the writer obviously had no idea what Robbins was doing visually in the panels. And he was giving dialogue to characters that weren't meant to have dialogue. Wow. And ignoring obvious visual cues that Robbins was setting up for what the characters were saying. Just completely oblivious to what was going on the page.
Huh.
I mean, completely working at cross purposes. But like Graham said, the lettering has to be part of the art. I mean, Russ Heath used to actually pencil in the word balloon and letter it on his art to make sure that he had exactly the right amount of room.
Okay, let's see. Oh, somebody wants to know if Chuck's scripts are available online.
If you go to chuckdixon.net, there's a few there. If you see me on Facebook, I'll send you some scripts you can look at.
There you go. Send Chuck a note and he'll send you some scripts.
You can also email me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. I'll send you some scripts.
There you go. Stupid DC let Graham and Chuck go by the wayside, and we, Monster Island, Levon, Joe Frankenstein, Bad Times, the Chenoo, Airboy, and Sunshine State. We're all the better for it. Yeah.
Yes.
Freedom from the yoke of oppression.
No gatekeepers.
That's right. No gatekeepers. Exactly. Do what we want.
Well, Graham, you're lucky. You got no gatekeepers because you can draw your own stuff.
That's true.
If I want you to draw my stuff, you're the gatekeeper. No, Chuck.
Chuck wants helicopters. No helicopters.
Chuck, I hate that story. Graham's very blunt, everybody. That's why I love working with Graham. You always know exactly where he stands. I know his every facial expression. I can see his facial expressions over the phone. When there's like a silence of more than 5 seconds, man, he hates everything I just said.
And then 6 seconds later, I say, I hate that, Chuck.
I hate that. I'm not doing that.
Oh, that's funny.
That's the secret to a good collaboration. We're completely 100% honest with each other.
That's true.
I tell Graham he's fantastic. He agrees with me.
So when can we expect a Dixon Nolan Western comic?
When Graham decides what kind of Western he wants to do.
What's that?
When Graham decides what kind of Western he wants to do.
Oh, you did ask me that question once.
I will write a Western for you in a heartbeat, but I got to know what kind you want. Because you and I both love Westerns, but we do have some differences of opinion. I want to make sure it's one you're happy with before we go anywhere.
So, in other words, I don't want a Rio Bravo script.
No. And I don't want to write Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. So there you go.
But I promise to make the lawyer younger.
Maybe. Maybe.
Hyperkaiju great. But one Rio Bravo right here.
Well, we both can agree we don't like High Noon. So
yes. Yeah, I don't dislike High Noon. I just
hate High Noon.
Different about it. I mean, High Noon does have Lon Chaney Jr. in it, so.
But I hate High Noon.
Do you actually hate it?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those cowardly allegories to, the Red Scare.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of commies decide to make a movie about how wonderful communism is, but they can't come right out and say it, so they make High Noon.
Yeah.
Where the bourgeois won't help the
yeah. Their best friend when he gets married and everything, but when the Frank Miller gang shows up, they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and the thing is, if the people who made that movie had read any Western history at all, they would understand what happened to gangs like that when they came into towns. They got shot to pieces by everybody because every single person in that town had a gun.
That is very true.
Yeah.
Oh, Cesar. Good to see you, my friend. Masters, the Bane conquest is wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. How do you look up references for panels with many elements? Well, that's the beauty of the internet, my friend.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, we used to keep what we called swipe files. And that was, we'd go through magazines, to get anybody threw out magazines and stuff. You'd just go through them and you'd cut out pictures of cars or clothes or buildings or whatever. And then you'd create file folders, and you have your buildings folder, you have your, your gun folder, your horse folder, all that kind of stuff. And you keep them in file cabinets. And just like the one behind me right here, only that's not filled with reference. Thank God for the internet, though, because now we can search for stuff and get it, get just about any kind of thing we need. It makes it so much faster.
I did a mini series a few years back with Butch Guice called Storming Paradise. And it was about the projected invasion of Japan at the end of World War II, an invasion that, thank God, never had to happen.
Right.
And it wasn't until we started doing it that we both realized how little visual reference was available for anything concerning the Japanese army. If we wanted to populate a story with Nazis, we had pictures of their bootlaces. I mean, we knew there were pictures of everything the Nazis did, very few reference books for the Japanese military, which seems weird. But thankfully, with the help of Larry Hama, who suggested some books published in Japan that I ended up buying, we were able to get down to the nitty-gritty on details.
Oh, fantastic.
But that was a bear. For a while, I was really terrified because I'm like, geez, we want to be able to show, things like cigarette lighters and things like that they used, and nothing. We couldn't find anything.
I adapted the first Louis L'Amour graphic novel. There needs to be a follow-up.
Cool.
Very cool. I hear some writers go to bars and listen to speak in the stories they tell.
I saw Mickey Spillane. I heard Mickey Spillane interviewed one time, and they said your dad owned a bar and you lived above the bar. You must have heard so many great stories. And Mickey Spillane said nobody's ever said anything interesting in a bar. And I think he was right.
Oh, that is not true. That is not true.
Well, maybe at his dad's bar.
Yeah, maybe his dad had a boring bar. Did I ever tell you the Jimmy Breslin story?
No.
Well, Jimmy Breslin, of course, you know him, this New York writer. uh, and he was dating a girl in Long Beach, where I used to live. And there's in fact, I'm wearing the shirt of the bar he was at. It's called Shines. It's in the west end of Long Beach, Long Beach, Long Island. And anyway, Breslin comes out to meet this girl. And he's going to meet the father, and the father is this big German right off the boat. Very stoic, straight, that kind of thing. And so he goes and he stops off at Shines, which is one of his watering holes, and he's going to have a couple pops before he goes meets the old man. So he's got a corsage for the girl, and he gives it to the owner of the bar and says, "Can you put this in the fridge for me to keep it fresh while I relax for a little bit?" So they do. He takes it in the back there, and Breslin has a few drinks. Well, some of the boys from Shines go in the back, and they deconstruct his corsage and remake it with lettuce and tomatoes and other vegetables. So they put it right back in the box of stuff, and Breslin says, "Well, I'm gonna head out now. Wish me luck." And they're like, "Oh, here, don't forget your corsage." So he goes up, and this is this little West End cottage in Long Beach. They used to just be summer getaways for people in the city, but they've since made them year-round homes. And anyway, so it's a two-story. So he goes up and he meets the father, and he's kind of giving the brush. He gives the corsage to the girl. She opens it up, and she's like, doesn't know what to think. And the old man's looking over her shoulder, and he sees this, and he thinks that he's fucking with him. And he grabs Breslin, throws him over the second-story balcony into a bush. And Breslin comes back to Shines, and he's beat to shit. He's got stuff sticking out of his hair and everything. And he walks back in and he goes, "You sons of bitches!" Oh my God! My father told me that story from back in the day, because it was a cop bar that he frequented when he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Funny. So yeah, there are great stories that come out of bars.
Well, when anyone can remember them.
Well, yeah. But we creatives, we observe. We listen. I was at that same bar one time, and this guy, this local guy, was there, and he was just pontificating. He was 3 sheets to the wind, and he just kept talking and talking, and I'd be like, trying to get a word in edgewise, and he just keeps going, and I finally, I said, "Okay, why don't we listen to you for a while?" And, and he goes like this. He doesn't skip a beat. He goes right back into it. And he goes, "And you must know how to fight with that mouth."
Oh God!
Crack me up. So let's see. I think we covered everybody in here. Let me just see if I missed anybody. Dr. Mass says he likes this inside baseball stuff, so that's cool.
We can go deeper than this.
Oh,
we have to name names.
Yeah. Didn't we just say you don't talk bad about other freelancers?
That's it. I did. As tempting as it is sometimes.
Yeah, that's for sure. Amazing with what the old guys did with 6.
My favorite comics in the world are Italian Western comics. Character called Tex Willer.
Yeah,
it's all grids, and I love it. I was lucky enough to write 3 stories for them. After 20 years of begging, they finally let me write some, and wow, I had the time of my life, because it's pure storytelling. It's pure comics.
Yeah, that's stuff. I wish they would translate them. I think they translated. Didn't they translate Kuberts?
They translated Kuberts, and it's weird because every time I bring up Tex Willer or something, I saw the Kubert one. Yeah, the guy's been around for 75 years. There's been thousands of these comics, and you saw Joe Kubert's. And I hate to say this because I love Joe Kubert, but it's the weakest Tex comic I've ever seen. I mean, he didn't understand the character at all.
Right.
And because there's some brilliant work on that stuff. Just absolutely gorgeous. Man, it must have been painful for him, because I mean, you can't have a character stick a foot out of a panel. You cannot violate. That is the proscenium arch. You cannot violate that panel border, or they'll come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Oh, so editorial dictates that?
Oh yeah, they have to be told because when I first bugged them, it was a Danish publisher that helped me get in because he said, "Let Chuck write some of these. He loves these. Let him write some." And they sent me all these rules about, there's 3 tiers and it's this many panels, and you can have a panel take up the upper tier, and but you can't whatever. They went through the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, I understand. It's old Dell comics. I understand it. That's what I love about it, so I want to write them. Because you guys are pure. You're doing, awesome stuff. And I finally convinced them to let me, go ahead.
That's cool.
They got to pay a translator, so they said we can't afford to have you do them anymore.
So Bo, I guess I missed Bo's question. He was yelling at me later on saying I didn't catch his question. So when did you two first meet in person, and was it all you thought it would be? Well, you were there, Bo. It was in that hotel room at ChicagoCon, 1987, 88. Remember when they had the Chicago Cons in Rosemont?
Oh, yeah, it was the Ramada Hotel.
Yeah.
Was that the first time we met?
In person, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, who was it? I knocked on the door, and Truman opened up the door and tackled me, I think. And then I came in, and you were there, Bo was there, Truman, I think Harkins.
And this was long before you were exposed to gamma radiation. So.
That's true.
I think I told you even then, you look like the third Everly brother.
The third Everly brother.
He's like this clean-cut kid,
Now I'm Uncle
Fester. Kid with a dream.
Barely a whisker.
But the thing is, you had it even then. You had the love of the medium. You knew the history. You had this passion about it. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It was
awesome.
Well,
let's see, how old was I? I was 80. I was like 25, 26, something like that.
Yeah, you look like you just got out of high school.
Yeah, I did. I looked young.
Yeah, you were a young-looking guy.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I met Bo, it was at an ABA convention. Dean Mulaney hired him to be marketing.
Okay.
And it was one of those rare, well, Bo gets this all the time. This is his life. It was one of those rare times you meet somebody within 10 seconds, go, I'm going to know this guy the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I like this guy. This guy he's not even trying hard to be, he's not trying to be hard to be liked at all. He was just being himself.
Yeah. I felt that way when we all met, that whole Four Winds crowd, that we were all hanging out and stuff. Is like, oh my God, I finally met people in the comics business that I relate to.
You could talk for hours and never have to explain anything because we all were speaking the same language.
Right. I remember one night, it must have been like 2 a.m. We all come back to the hotel room. We're lounging around on the beds and stuff. And, we just started describing, panels from a comic. Do you remember that panel where, da, 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 da. And you're like, yeah, that was Spider-Man 47. I remember that. And, and oh yeah, it's like you're talking this visual language that all these other guys completely understood, but anybody else listening in would have been like, the hell's wrong with these guys? What are they talking about?
Yeah, that was the hardest thing at those cons was getting to sleep, to stop talking and go to sleep. Because I don't know how I made it. So those 3-day cons will turn into marathons because you do it on like 2 hours sleep a night.
Yeah. What was really cool about that particular hotel was the bar was in the center of the hotel.
Yeah.
And it was in Rosemont, so it wasn't in Chicago. So there was unless you got a taxi or you knew somebody with a car, you weren't going anywhere. So
that was your whole life for 3 days.
That was it, but fans and pros would all meet at the bar. You could be standing next to, number one fan, and your back is up against Stan Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And literally, That's what it was like, because I had Stanley standing over my shoulder at that bar one time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one time sitting and talking with Al Williamson and another guy for like an hour and a half.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't until the other guy got up to leave that I found it's Bernie Wrightson. I didn't know who he was. We were just talking.
Right.
But stuff like that would happen all the time.
Yeah. I miss that, the smallness of the shows.
Yeah.
The more love and fandom that was in those shows versus like these big corporate shows where there's so much going on.
I remember years later when they moved the Chicago show to the convention center, it was far more corporate. And, we'd all been in the business a little bit longer. We were a bit jaded.
Mm-hmm.
And a whole troop of us went over to Giordano's for pizza.
Oh, yeah.
And a bunch of fans went with us, and so all the pros end up at one table and the fans end up at like the little kids table, like at Thanksgiving. And afterwards, I'm talking with one of the fans who, later went pro. And he says, man, we're sitting over there. We couldn't imagine what you guys were talking about. We wanted to be at that table so bad and hear what you were talking about. What were you talking about? And I said, we were talking about mortgage rates. Which we were.
Oh, man. Matt McAllister says they need another Winter World by you and Butch.
Yeah, well, we got close to that TV show. If that had happened, we would have done more. But, it may still happen.
It's hard. Putting a comic together is a lot of work. And if it doesn't financially pay off, it's very hard to muster up the energy to do another one. Because you're unfortunately having to chase that dollar,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's getting harder and harder as the business gets, more niche and sales go down. I mean, we're in a boutique medium, unfortunately. One that used to be at the very center of American pop culture is now, a subculture at best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The upside of that is that the crowdfunding allows you to get your product directly to that fan base, which I think is fantastic. I love the interaction that I have with my backers on the Chenoo, and the response that I get from them, and I just think it's great. It's so energizing.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff with Richard Meyer, and he comes up with the craziest ideas that then I have to turn into a comic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having the time of my life because the ideas are great,
mm-hmm.
But they're unformed and wacky, and I've got to make them work dramatically and populate them with characters and stuff like that. But the two of us are having so much fun, and I hand the work in, and he goes, "This isn't what I wanted, but I love it." So, it's a really weird time in the business, but I'm as busy as I've ever been and having as much fun as I've ever
been. Yeah. I'm happier now than I've been in, probably since you and I were doing detective together, because that was a special time.
Yeah.
We worked at a company that cared about you then. You had an editorial team that was committed and professional, and
they have faith in us,
and we were doing great work, and we're working on Batman. So I mean, it was awesome. But not since then have I been this creative and this happy, writing and illustrating, these different projects that I'm doing.
Well, God bless you. You got the backing, and I hope it continues for you, because it's, like I said, it's pure comics. When the same guy's writing it and drawing it, that's pure comics. I mean, yeah, I love writing comics and everything else, but I can't do what you can do. Even when we collaborate, I can't do what you did on Chenoo, because that's your whole vision. Plus, you're a good writer. So
thank you.
No, you are. You've always been a good writer. You come up with these terrific ideas. So I'm so happy to see you like that.
The master, I bow before you as a Padawan.
Yeah, Roy Crane taught you how to write.
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned Roy Crane because I think the next show that I do in this Storytellers, I'm going to be talking about Roy Crane. So, Statistical Zero, you had mentioned something about wanting to see adventure strip artists mentioned here, and you get your wish because I'm going to be deconstructing Roy Crane in a way you probably have never seen before, and why he is so great even today, and that young modern artists should be looking at his stuff to figure out why that's working. Remember I talked about immersion?
Hmm.
There's a reason why his work is so immersive, and I'll go into that when we talk about that next week.
Yeah, why he was such a daily habit for millions of people.
Oh,
Uh, millions.
the father of the adventure strip.
Yeah.
Yep, he wrote a language that we still copy today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Jasper Plan 9, welcome. Glad you made it in. Graham posts excellent updates for the Canoe. Well, thank you. Yeah, I do updates every week, keeping everybody updated on where we are. And the files are sent off. They're being paginated right now and getting ready for the printer. So everything is done. I'm working on sketches for people that I owe. And, you know, everything is, the train is getting ready to pull into the station.
Very cool.
Now, Chuck, you've got some really cool projects coming up that you might want to talk about and tell the fans. Here's one.
Yeah, this is I talked about Richard Meyer. This is one I wrote for him called Impossible Stars. It's the start of a science fiction universe that Richard's come up with, and this is like the first adventure. And I've written a second one for him. Basically, he wanted to. His idea was to do a Tom Cruise science fiction movie.
Okay.
And this is my bad time series, but
here, flip it. Second.
Graham.
Yep. All right, everybody, take a drink.
Keep that on there.
Take a drink. I swiped my damn. Shit. I gotta go. I gotta get that link back.
Well, the bad times thing is up now. I'll talk about that.
All right, talk about bad times. And while you're talking about that, I'll get that other link.
Yeah, I wrote a series. Retired, get involved in the time travel experiment. Go visit places like Roman Judea, prehistoric Nevada, a civil war in China in the 1800s, the Prussians invading Paris, that kind of things. It's my toy soldier fantasy series, and this is the first 6 books in one huge volume. So if you like time travel, you like military adventure, you like dinosaurs, you're going to want to look at this.
Okay, awesome. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, Impossible Star. It's part of a science fiction series. I've already written a second one and a couple of short stories based on Richard's concepts, and it's got some really. It reminds me a lot of science fiction I read as a kid, like late 50s, early 60s sci-fi, back when it was good. And it's not space opera or anything like that. It's real hard science fiction concepts about an alien invasion and the human race being basically restricted in advancement by a unseen alien race. So it's cool stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's still up there if you want to, get a copy.
So, you want me to play the video?
Yeah, why not?
Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and this is my promotional video for my new Indiegogo campaign, Impossible Stars graphic novel. I'm very, very excited about this. This was actually ready in January, but I got kind of nervous because it's sci-fi. I haven't done sci-fi before. But then when I saw it all finished, I got so confident that the sequel is already being written. It's a new franchise, not just a book. And basically all of the sci-fi ideas I have will get put into this timeline. So it's about Earth, about 200 years in the future. And they finally created FTL, faster than light drive, So finally, we can explore beyond our solar system. Just as we're about to launch our first voyage out to the stars, an alien empire communicates a threat. If we leave our solar system, the planet will be destroyed. As a show of force, they use a beam weapon to destroy a major metropolitan area, to which the nations of Earth basically.
Yeah, I think Zach needs to work on his videos. That one, I'm looking at the time thing on the time loop, and that goes for a while there, you know.
But you get the idea. You get the idea.
Yeah, I think you did a better job of pitching that. Okay. Oh, there's Sturdy Steve in the Army again.
I enjoy seeing that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my boy Hemingway. Do you believe that?
No, he was a bit of a drama queen.
A little pretentious, huh?
A little pretentious. You know, writers go, I'm suffering. Well, then get another job. I love writing. You know, yeah, I used to think, because they always tell you, well, writers, they burn out after a while. I don't have that experience. If anything, it's become a compulsion. I can't stop writing. I have to write. So, which is not how I thought it would be at this point in my career.
Well, there it is, David Williams. Chuck just answered your question before even reading it.
Oh, yeah, I got so many stories to tell. I'll never get to everything I want to tell. Now, I finally wrote a book, a novel that I've thought of, boy, like 40 years ago. And it's a Western. And it's a Western trope nobody's ever used. And I can talk about it because I wrote the novel. Nobody's going to beat me to it. It's about the paleontologists who went west. And instead of fighting over, land rights or water or anything like that, they're fighting over, dinosaur bones.
Mm-hmm.
And this actually happened. The two major paleontologists, they went out west, and they would actually hire gun hands, and they would hide their digs. And when they were done digging, they would dynamite them closed so the other guy couldn't show up.
Jeez.
So it's a Western about an English lord and his daughter who show up in the Big Bend area of Texas because a T-Rex skeleton has been found, and they want to explore there. And of course, they run into all the usual nonsense with Apaches and stuff.
And that's already been published?
No, I wrote it. I haven't published it yet.
Okay.
It's called La Gringa.
La Gringa?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds cool.
Yeah, it was fun to write. It's fun to finally get it out of my system.
What is Chuck's favorite sci-fi writer?
Wow. I think Frederick Paul would be my favorite. And then, Richard Matheson, but Richard Matheson was mostly a horror writer. And then also Robert Sheckley. I like all those guys.
Okay.
Old school.
I don't know what I did there.
Yeah, I started reading sci-fi in the 70s when it started getting either perverse or political. It stopped being escapist entertainment.
I like Matheson's stuff too.
No, Matheson was a genius. He invented the modern horror story. Stephen King would not exist without Matheson.
Did you ever see my 31 Days of Monsters talking about the Night Stalker?
No.
Yeah, because about Richard Matheson. He wrote the screenplay for that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I went to a Saturday matinee, and it was a double bill. And the first feature was the most boring British science fiction movie I think I've ever seen in my life. I can't even remember the name of it. And nothing happened in this movie. It was all talk. And so all the kids left. The movie ended, and I was the only kid left in the theater. And the second feature was The Last Man on Earth, which is based on Richard Dixon's I Am Legend. And it scared the shit out of me. And I was the only kid in the theater. And when I got up to leave, when it was over, the theater manager was sitting in the back row. He sat down to watch the movie. And he said, "That was a hell of a movie, wasn't it, kid?" I went, "Yeah." And then I got to go home and tell all the kids in the neighborhood, "You missed the best movie. You left and missed the best movie ever made."
That's that version. I think they shot it in Mexico with
Yeah,
Vincent.
yeah.
That's the closest one to the book.
Oh, absolutely. It's completely faithful to the book. It's got everything in it.
Yeah, even the guy's name, everything.
Yeah, it's still a creepy movie, and it's basically gave birth to the zombie genre because Night of the Living Dead lifted everything from it.
Oh, absolutely,
You know,
absolutely. They were like vampires, I guess.
they were vampires, yeah, because he
Yeah.
would go around during the day killing them, but he couldn't find the leader. Yeah, his former next door neighbor was the leader of the vampire clan. He couldn't find him. But it
Right.
was great. He was going into like supermarkets and finding them in freezers and instead of
Yeah.
coffee. Just really cool stuff.
Yeah, and then he'd have to burn. He was driving his station wagon out and just dropping bodies off, and
Yeah.
he's in a fire pit that was constantly burning.
Yeah. And then he's like he would hang mirrors on the outside of the house and crosses.
Oh yeah. Forgot about that.
Oh,
That's
great
a cool gig.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes in fiction is in the novel. It's in the movie as well. Is he gets drunk watching old home movies, and he gets drunk, and he just gets so angry that he opens the door, and they're all outside. He just opens the door and stands on the front walk, just shooting, even though he knows it's not going to do any good. Just empties his guns into them.
Yeah, he's so pissed off at what became of his world because of them.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, and it has a kind of a sad ending too.
Yeah, that was an ending that blew my mind. I mean, I read it, I'm like, I had to think about it for a really long time. And, when you're reading a book like that and you're like 13 or 14, you're like wide open for pretension.
Yeah.
It's like pretension is a second language to an adolescent. And it just is so cool to me. It's like, the ending of the book.
Right. David wants to know, what comic book do we have to read every year?
I don't know.
I don't really have an answer for that because I rarely read comics anymore. I tend to go back and look at old comics and kind of scan them, with my eyes. I look at the pictures, I look at the imagery, and I read I scan the dialogue, word balloons and stuff like that. But I don't sit down and really immerse and read them. It's just too busy,
But,
and I'll be honest, I can't stay awake after dinner to read anything anymore.
Well, if you'd stop hitting the bottle while you work, So.
Hey, I heard all great writers drink, and all great cartoonists definitely did.
I wonder what great writer told you that. And David, I'm enjoying Bass Reeves. So
yes,
but I not to diss you at all, but Nora's Saga, man, that's a hell of a comic. You guys are doing some terrific work there.
Yeah. David's Bass Reeves is so consistently good. I thought the second issue of Nora's was weak.
Oh, I didn't. I love that.
I thought it looked rushed. It felt rushed, whereas like David's and Kevin's book looked, just so sharp.
No, all those books are good looking books. You guys are doing
absolutely
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, and Mitch and Elizabeth are killing it over there. So
yeah,
if you guys haven't supported the Allegiance Arts books, give them a look because there's some great talent working on them.
Walmart or go to Walmart.com and find them. They are definitely worth reading. I don't read many contemporary comics. I don't miss these.
I agree. I was going to say I don't read any contemporary comics really,
no.
But I
didn't want to jump on my own industry.
Well, there's only so much, I guess. I just feel like there's just not enough time in the day to do everything I want. And I have to. If I'm working on comics all day long, I don't know that I necessarily want to spend those last waking hours reading them either. You know.
Yeah, it's funny. If I'm working on comics, I read prose. If I'm working on prose, I read comics.
Yes.
But I read a lot of comics because they're reprinting so much awesome stuff.
Yes. Yes.
I
That's
can,
the stuff I do read. I
can
do
read Karl Marx. I can read Little Orphan Annie from the beginning. Yeah, I'm doing that.
David wants to tell him more about his eyes. They're limpid pools of brown, David.
I was trying to remember what Bud said. Oh, God.
Chuck, how do you disconnect from seeing your work completely mangled when it jumps media, specifically your Birds of Prey, versus what hit the screen?
When it comes to Hollywood, you have to turn your heart to a stone. I remember when I first met Denny O'Neil, he talked about he pitched an episode of it was Logan's Run, the TV series. He pitched an episode of it, and he's sitting in the production meeting. And I found out over the years that every production meeting goes the same way. It's like a template. And so he's sitting there, and he says that, whatever the lead characters are, they come to a land of giants. And the producer holds his hand up. He turns to the guy next to him and says, "We have a dwarf under contract, don't we?" And he goes, "Yeah." "Could they meet a dwarf?" And then he said, "That's when I realized what Hollywood was about."
Wow.
You just write whatever it is they want to write, take the money, and walk away.
Yeah.
And, I have no control over what they do with this stuff. I mean, I was talking to a screenwriter once because they were talking about Winter World as a feature film. And he said, "Well, the producers are talking about making the girl character a little older. What do you think about that?" And I said, "I think you should get my name right on the check." It over. They're asking my opinion now out of courtesy, but they're going to forget about me the minute they're working.
Sure.
I said, they're going to make whatever they want to make. To me, the comic book is eternal. My work on the comic is eternal. You can always go back to the original comic and look at it and see what I meant it to be. So I don't care. They can change the crap all they want. But they should have given us some money for Birds of Prey, which they didn't.
Oh.
Because the deal. We didn't create the characters. We just created the concept.
Right.
So
yeah. Two great quotes about Hollywood. One was from Hemingway. He said, when you're dealing with Hollywood, you drive up to the border, you take the money, you throw them the script, and you drive away. And then Raymond Chandler said, if my stories had been any worse, Hollywood wouldn't ask me to come out. If they'd have been any better, I wouldn't have gone.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. There's P.G. Wodehouse came to Hollywood for a year, the creator of Jeeves and Wooster. I mean, just fabulously successful novelist. Guy wrote like 90 novels, bestsellers, all of them. He came to Hollywood for a year and just sat around, while they couldn't make up their mind. I mean, he was like the golden boy, but they never made anything from any of his material. And he kept pitching stuff, and they finally just said, "I'm just going to go back to England. I'm going to go home." And he was actually more productive when he was a prisoner of the Nazis than he was in his year in Hollywood.
Wow.
So
worried about DC operating on a skeleton crew. From what I've heard of their collected editions department is gone, that we won't see so many of your great works in omnibus. DC is sitting on a gold mine.
I think
they fired more people today, didn't they?
Well, Marvel fired more people. I think Random House handles all of their collections anyway.
Okay.
They haven't done their own collections for years.
I thought I saw Aaron Lopresti posting something about there was another bloodletting at DC with more people gone.
They should let them all go.
Yeah, start from scratch.
Just pick the first 5 people that walk past the entrance on the street, have them run the company. It would work out better.
I thought that's what they did. That's what they did. I mean, nobody seems to understand the characters.
No, no. Well, they haven't. They gave into that philosophy that started when we were there. It was starting when we were there. It's sort of anti-hero philosophy that was building amongst some of the younger editors. Not any of our editors.
Right.
We worked with people that got it.
Yeah. And,
the comic books sold.
Right. We use the term gatekeeper, and usually that it's a pejorative word to keep creators from doing what they want. But in the sense that that DC in the day had their Mike Carlins and their Denny O'Neills, who were the gatekeepers of those characters, that they knew who those characters were, and they respected the characters and watched over those characters to make sure that they stayed true to what they were and what the fans wanted.
Well, they were stewards, and they understood that. And the other thing is that when Jeanette and Paul were running the company, they jealously guarded the DC brand, and they watched over the comic book end of things to make sure we weren't always getting screwed.
Right, because Warner Brothers was trying to.
Well, yeah, and who could blame them, right? I mean, everybody was trying to screw them, the toy companies, everybody, but they wouldn't stand for it, and they made sure, over time that the freelancers became more and more involved on the financial end of things, but the new crowd that took over after them, they just literally gave away the store to Warner's and screwed everybody.
AT&T now.
Well, yeah, but like that makes it even better. It's the phone company.
Yeah,
they'll treat us right.
That's in debt.
Well, of course it is. It's a telephone company. Who's going to buy them next? Wonder Bread? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Well, you got Warner Brothers, who allowed themselves to be bought by AOL, and AOL was a joke 2 years after its creation.
Yeah.
And then AOL runs the show, and they're telling everybody what to do, and they you don't even know how to run a dial-up internet service. You're going to tell a major publisher, major TV and movie production company what to do. I remember when I was at CrossGen, we made a deal with AOL. It was like a sweetheart deal that CrossGen would always get mentioned whenever something came up about comic books. And at the final meeting, when they're signing the papers, the guy from AOL says, "Yeah, it's a shame we don't have our own comic book franchise." I remember Mark Alessi saying, "It was the hardest thing in the world not to open my mouth." Say, "You own DC Comics, you dumb schmucks."
Wow.
So that's what your big parent mega corporation thinks of comics. They forget they're there.
Yeah.
Because you can see it in the movies at DC and now in movies at Marvel. They think they don't need the comic book material anymore. They can move on and do their own stuff.
Right. Yeah, they just hire a screenwriter to take that basic concept and run with it.
Yeah. And then they're populating the movies now with characters that have been around for 15 minutes. That they want to force the public to like.
Right.
It's like you remember every time they would do Justice League of America, it would sell great. Of course it would. It's got Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern in it. And then they would start putting in their own characters, and sales would go down every single time. And they never figured it out.
Characters together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's put a gypsy in. Yeah, that's what the kids want. No, they want Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, and Green Lantern.
I have no time for Marvel or DC anymore. Too many good books on Indiegogo and alternate comics. That's where I'm at. Yeah, alternate. Pete Zametti is doing some great work with his alternate comics. There's some really, really great products coming out of there. So if you guys haven't checked that out, you should check out alternate comics. They're really, really good stuff.
Have you seen
Indiegogo? Let's do a little shameless promotion for mine, the Chenu, as we're getting ready to start fulfilling this bad boy.
Look at those numbers.
Yes, it's doing quite well. I'm very happy with this little snow monster.
You've done good.
Look at and the beer is being brewed right now. The well, you knew this was coming, Chuck. Chuck likes to bust my balls and
The beer,
say,
by the way, is an artisan stout based on an Incan recipe using acorn husks that have passed the digestive tract of an alpaca.
"Oh, did I tell you about this then?" Yeah, this for you beer lovers. This is an imperial stout with a 9% ABV on it. It's going to be.
Oh, it is a stout. I was joking.
Here's what the labels look like too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. You know, I mean, I'm not making any money on the beer. The beer guys will make the money on that. But one of the things I'm happy about is that when we do the tap party for this, you know, I'll be there signing cans and stuff like that, and hopefully I'll have the comics as well. But sale of the beer that night at the party, and the stuff that I'm doing as well, a portion of that all goes towards Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is a fantastic fantastic group that we benefited from. So that's my go-to charity, and I always like to support the people over there. So
very cool.
So if you haven't gotten on board, check out the Chenoo. I will put the link right here in the comments. Make it easy for you. And you can check that out and watch this really cool movie, which is, you know what? I'm going to play the movie because after watching Zach's movie, I got a bad taste in my mouth. This movie was put together by Nick Grosh, and it's like I want to see this as a movie.
I'll bet you do.
I do.
State of emergency declared this morning in Buffalo.
Between 4,000 and 5,000 cars said to be abandoned on city streets.
Buffalo is still very much a city under siege.
Space's wind whips the snow into 30-foot drifts.
Charles Air Base, one of their
Low tonight, 10 below zero. Get off the streets and highways as soon as possible.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That is cool.
And it's not 45 pages; it's 64 pages because we hit all those stretch goals. So
and there's the latest Ask Chuck Dixon right up there, smiling Stan Lee on it.
Ah, yeah, yeah. There's both of us together. That's cool.
Neato.
Awesome. All right, so let's see. We got a couple more, and then we'll call it a night here. Hey guys, really enjoying the conversation and the behind-the-scenes stories. Any plans on doing more of these videos? If so, will you be including other guests in the conversations? Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna interview other writers and artists as well. And then, as I said earlier, I'll be talking about specific cartoonists or writers or artists on my own, and actually showing their work and deconstructing it and giving you the reasons why these guys, while people might not know who they are, why they're so important and why they're so good at what they do. So it's a little bit of education and fun at the same time.
A big part of enjoying comics is knowing the history, and a lot of that gets lost. I know Graham and I, and a lot of the guys we came into the business with, we were all comic book historians. We all went back and looked at what came before. And there's simply not enough of that done.
Right. I mean, if you knew who Artie Simek was, You know, that person was actually reading the credits.
Yes.
So,
Cool.
well, Chuck, we've been on for almost 2 hours now, bud.
Wow, we could go for another 2, but
Oh yeah.
you don't like me that much, so I'm going to go. That page with the elephant. I think that was the breaking point for us.
You mean the Assyrian war elephant?
Yes, yes. And I want to tell you right now, I don't mean to hurt your feelings. It didn't look anywhere near Assyrian enough for my taste.
I know. I didn't get the eyes right.
Nah, you got it all wrong. All
Oh
wrong.
yeah.
But what can you do?
What a hack. Oh man. Well,
Man.
thanks everybody for tuning in. Even though we had some glitches with YouTube and Nolan himself, but we all as a team managed to plow through. Saturday mornings, we're gonna do Graham Nolan's Roundup, and we're gonna do westerns. We're gonna talk about Western movies on Saturday mornings. So in place of the 31 Days of Monsters, we're going to do Saturday morning Westerns. So bone up on your cowboy movies, folks, because we're going to be talking about the first Western I'd ever seen on Saturday, and that's called The Sons of Katie Elder, Henry Hathaway and John Wayne. So that's what we'll talk about. I hope you'll tune in for that. Next week we'll do another storyteller, and I'll be talking about the great Roy Crane. So big hand to my pal Chuck. Thanks so much for coming on, buddy. It was so great talking to you and picking your brain and learning so much about your process, how you go about telling stories. So
As always, sir, it was a pleasure.
Thanks again, gang, and we shall see you Saturday morning. Keep your pistols loaded.